Well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to some of these videos I'm doing for GingerGM. Sorry about the delay. The problem is I've just moved into a new apartment, so I'm starting to pay rent and everything. I haven't got the internet set up at the moment, so I'm sort of going to go around my mate's house to post this video. So hopefully Sky will get their arse into gear, and I will have internet in the next couple of weeks. Fingers crossed anyway. What I'm about to show you now is an interesting game I had in the local league. For Sandhurst against Farnham yesterday. I was playing Ian Sharp, who's roughly about 210 grade. I had the white pieces, and it was a French opening. I thought I'd try E4 out because I've just done a DVD on the French, so I thought I'd try out some of the ideas maybe that I was having a look at in that DVD I've just done. It was quite an enjoyable game, I have to say. It had some nice finish at the end, and it was quite short and sweet. So hopefully I can keep your attention span and you won't turn off before the end comes. But anyway, let's move straight on to the game. So I started with E4. I've been playing this move a bit more often nowadays, just to try to mix things up a little bit. My opponent played E6, and I was expecting this as he's played this before. So I went D4. I've also tried knight to F3 in this position, with the idea of getting a wing gambit after D5, E5, C5, B4. This is quite an interesting opening. I actually played this against the same player a couple of years ago. The whole idea is this: after they take on D4 and B4, you go D4 at some point, and this pawn of D4 can no longer be attacked by Black's C pawn, because the C pawn's now moved over to B4. So White's basically saying, well, I've got good compensation because I've got a strong space advantage in the centre. So it's quite an interesting gambit, that wing gambit. For more of that, then obviously by my forthcoming DVD. Anyway, on to the main line. It went D4, D5, and now I played knight to C3. So this is the second time I've played this in my life. I've only had this once before against Keith Arkle, which went into a Fort Knox after D takes E4. You can have a look at that game in some previous posts. My opponent here now played bishop to B4. Now this was the main line, the main winnerware line. This is what I play as Black as well, and what I'm going to recommend in the forthcoming DVD. So I know a fair bit about this. I decided to go E5 here. A line that I was really considering playing, about a 5-minute think here, was A3, which is hardly ever analysed, but the main idea after this is bishop takes C3, B takes C3, and now if Black takes a pawn on E4, White throws his queen over to G4. And I think this is a very underrated line, this actually. I mean, White's going to win pawn back, either the pawn on E4 or G7, and he's got this dark square bishop, which is could come into the game later on, maybe via A3 or something. So, you know, when the pawn goes to A4, this bishop can come shooting across the board like that. So that's another interesting idea, but I decided to go main line here, so I went E5. The only thing is I don't really know much about the main line unless my opponent plays what I normally play. So anyway, my opponent went C5, so it's still following the main recommendation. A3, bishop takes C3, B takes C3, and now queen to C7. So this is where I start to get a bit hazy with my analysis, because what I'm going to recommend in my DVD here is knight to E7, which is very interesting and very fun. After queen to C7, I thought I'd play the most critical line, which is queen to G4. I generally think that in the winnerware French, the only way that White can try to aim to get an advantage is by playing this queen to G4 move. I think if he tries to fluff about with any other sort of sideline, if Black's well prepared, then White's really going to find no way to get a clear advantage. The only way to test the winnerware French is by playing queen to G4 at an early stage. So take hint there if you're a player who plays the white side of the winnerware. So now if Black had played knight to E7 here, this would have transposed back into the main line. But my opponent played F5 here, which I briefly remember Bovnik playing a long time ago, but my theory had stopped here, but I just played natural moves. So queen to G3, defending the C3 square and keeping pressure on G7. My opponent now took on D4. At the time I thought this was maybe a bit of a mistake, releasing the tension, but I only found out an hour ago this is actually the main line. The other very interesting line is knight to E7 immediately, when things get crazy after queen takes G7, rook G8, queen takes H7, C takes D4, threatening queen to C3, whoops the daisy, and now something like knight to E2 I think has been recommended, and this is obviously a complete mess, but As you should know by now, if you watched my videos in the past, give me a miss and I've got a smile on my face. So queen to g3, my opponent took on d4. Okay, so I took back on d4, and now black played knight to e7. So perfectly sensible move, getting ready to castle. So I can't take on g7 now because my opponent just goes rook g8, followed up by queen to c3 check, which would be most embarrassing. So I just developed and I defended the c3 square. So now I'm threatening queen takes g7. My opponent castled. I went bishop to d3, the best square for the bishop, defending c2. My opponent now played b6. Now b6 is a typical French idea. If you play the French, you've got to get used to this idea. I mean, black's worst piece is light square bishop. By playing b6, he gets ready to play bishop to a6, and later on he can put a rook on the c file, pressure down the c line. But white's got a lot of pressure on black's king side here, so black has to remain very cautious about attack, and my opponent strayed quite early on. So I went knight to e2, bishop to a6, and now knight to f4. So all my moves just look very logical at the time. I'm threatening knight takes e6, and the knight can also possibly maybe hop over to this square at some point, which looks like a laugh. So my opponent has to defend e6, so queen to d7. And now I took on a6. Like I said, I looked at this game about an hour ago just to see if there's any improvements here. And I found out that this actual same position has been reached, and Spassky has actually played bishop to b4 here, which looks like a very logical and maybe good move, maybe an improvement on what I played, bringing this bishop into the game, put it on a useful square. For example, now if black plays bishop takes d3, white can play knight to h5, and already black's in a lot of trouble here. He's probably losing this already. So in future I'd probably play this. But bishop to a6 looked perfectly natural, because after knight to a6 I thought, well, this knight on a6 looks like a bad piece to me. It's going to take black a long time to get this piece back in the game, and I can start an attack. So h4. Okay, so I'm just going for black's king here. My general idea is to throw this h-pawn up the board. Maybe I've got knight g6 ideas at some point. My queen might come to g5, followed by rook to h3 to g3. So just going for a full frontal attack here. And my opponent made a mistake straight away. He played king to h8. Now this actually helps me. Maybe after this move, black's in a lot of trouble already. And the main move here, for those who are interested, is rook to f7. Black's got to take a bit of time out to defend his king side in this position. This plugs some holes up, and now black's ready to try to generate some play on the queen side moves like rook to c8. And then maybe this queen can come into the game as well. So king to h8 after h4, just walking into my plan. And now h5. So my idea, as you can probably see from my big red arrows, is to play knight to g6 check, open up the h-file, checkmate my opponent, end of the game, thank you very much. My opponent now played another error. He played rook on f to c8. Now he needs this rook over near the king side. He had to play rook to f7 here. This would have been an improvement. At least this sort of tries to cover some holes. But rook fc8 runs into a lot of trouble. After my next move, I think white's already winning. Now, I didn't play knight to g6 check here, which looks very natural, because I couldn't see an improvement a way through after king to g8. I thought maybe any exchange of knights would help black. And for example, if I go queen to h4 here, I had a brief look at this variation, h takes g6, and now h6 was my original idea, trying to blow open some lines. And if king f7, take on g7, then I saw this move knight to g8, which covers the all-important f6 square, and I've got no obvious way I can get through here. So I've got to be a bit careful how I proceed. But after rook fc8, queen to h4 was a very good move. And already black is probably completely lost here. Let's have a look at some options that he's got. He played rook to c7 to defend the knight on e7 in the end. Let's say if he goes h6, this loses. This queen takes e7, queen takes e7, knight to g6 check, winning a piece. So he can't do that. If he goes king to g8, trying to run away, then I just go h6 with a winning position. I'm just going to open up black's king. I calculated knight to g6, knight takes g6, h takes g7, queen takes g7, bishop to g5, and I'm just going to go bishop to f6 with a one game here. So what else can he do? Well, after queen to h4, well, what if he takes on c2? Well, this looks natural. Well, then I just go knight to g6 check, and you can see now why my queen is much better on h4, because I'm putting extra pressure on this knight on e7. So this is going to be just a one position here. For example, if knight takes, h takes, h6, then I just go bishop takes h6, completely smashing up the h file. So after Rook to hc7. I now played h6, opening up some lines. Rook to g8 was played. I open up some more lines, and now I play queen to f6. So I'm threatening my knight in. And what does black play here? Well, I was hoping my opponent play knight to g8 here. Can you spot the checkmate in this position? It's a very cute checkmate. Can I like spend a second or two here just trying to work out what it is? Think of those pins on the h file on the a1 h8 diagonal. Well, the checkmate would have been knight to g6. Alleluia. Not a nice checkmate, that one. The knight comes into the game. So my opponent's basically completely busted off this queen to f6 move. And he tried to struggle on with rook to c6, defending the e6 square. Now, I could have just gone knight to h5, which would have won the exchange. And this was quite tempting. For example, I mean, my opponent has to do something like knight to g8, and I just swap everything off on g7. This is completely one position, but I was really enjoying myself too much here. And if you look at black's pieces, he can hardly move anything. He can't move his rook on g7. He can't move his... Well, he can't really move his knight on e7 because of this knight to g6 check. He hasn't got any moves. What's my only piece that's not taking part in the game? Well, my rook on a1. So I wanted to try to get this piece into the game. So instead of taking material, I just played a4. The idea of going rook to a3, swing it around to either g3 or h3. My opponent now played knight to c7, so he's trying to get one of his pieces back into the game. The line I analysed here went king to g8, rook to a3, knight to g6, and now knight to h5. Rook takes h7 was also probably winning here. Very complicated line that, but I was just calculating knight to h5, and if rook to f7, then rook to g3. This nice little intermezzo move, which actually wins the game. I mean, for example, if black takes on f6, then I take the knight, and I'm going to beat a whole rook up because I'm going to win the queen on d7. And what else does black do? Well, I'm just threatening after rook to g3 to play rook takes g6, just completely winning the game basically. So this is what I thought my opponent might play up a4, but he went knight to c7, so rook to a3, good move. Knight to e8 was now played, and okay, now I'm really enjoying myself here. I'm glad I didn't go for the taking the exchange on g7. I went queen to f8 check. My opponent now played knight to g8. Another little puzzle for you. If he goes rook to g8, it's checkmate in 2 moves. Should be quite simple. Look for all checks and catches in this position. Think about this little boyo over here, where it can go. Can it come around here at some point? Yes, it can. Rook takes h7 check, and if king takes, rook to h3 is checkmate. So after queen to f8, my opponent only had one move, knight to g8. Now, I had 2 choices of winning lines here. I mean, I played rook over here, so I thought this was more pretty. This move, rook takes h7 check, is also winning as well. For example, I'll just give you one line. King takes, if rook takes h7, then my knight goes to g6 for checkmate. So after rook h7, black has to go king takes h7. Rook to h3 check, and only one way to block that, knight to h6. And now I've got the beautiful move, knight to g6 here, which unleashes my bishop on d2 and my rook against this knight on h6. For example, if rook takes g6, then bishop takes h6. And I'm just going to move my bishop away next move, and I'm going to unleash my rook here against the king on h7. So that was one tempting way to win, but I thought I'd just bring my other rook in, keep the attention, because black can hardly move any pieces here. What's my initial threat here? Well, my initial threat in this position is to go rook takes h7, and if black plays rook takes h7, knight to g6 checkmate. So black has to cover this g6 square. So you now play queen to f7. So I saw this all coming in the game, and the reason I went for this line rather than rook h7 because my next move. Now, what should I play here? Well, there's a number of ways to win, but like I said, this is quite an enjoyable game. I mean, of course, I can probably just take the queens off, but I saw a very nice idea here. Okay, well, black, given a chance, he might take my pawn on c2. Can he take my queen on f8? Well, the move I played here, which I'm quite proud about actually, was king to d1. The nice quiet move in the middle of the battle. So what you might be thinking, well, why can't black take my queen on f8? Well, now if he goes queen takes f8, he's releasing the g6 square, so I can just go knight to g6 check, another piece thrown in the fire. Rook takes g6, rook takes h7 checkmate. So a very nice checkmate there. So after king to d1, the game now finished. Rook to c7, so trying to defend laterally. I bring my last piece into the game, bishop to b4, and black try to take the queen off, queen takes f8, and I can no longer play this knight to g6 check here, because my opponent can go rook takes, and now he's moved his rook to c7, so he's defending his pawn on h7. But after queen takes, I just play simply bishop takes, rook to g4, now I just took on e6, after rook to f7 I play knight to d8, another nice move. You can see all my pieces are sort of harmonious. My opponent took on d4 with a spike check, my king shuffled over to c1, and black's in a lot of trouble here. I mean, if he goes rook takes f8, again I go rook takes h7 checkmate. In this position I'm threatening to go knight takes f7 checkmate. My opponent played rook to c7, and now checkmate in 2 moves. Look at all those checks and catches. I just went rook to h7 check, and my opponent resigned here, because if he plays rook takes h7, my knight would just hop into f7 with checkmate. So I was quite pleased with that game. My opponent was obviously in a lot of trouble after he did this funny king manoeuvre earlier on. Just go back to that. After h4, my opponent played king to h8, so that's the start of his problems. And my favourite move of the game was after rook a to h3. My opponent played queen to f7, trying to defend his g6 square, and now I enjoy playing this very quiet move, just king to d1, taking time out before I increase the pressure on black's position. It's a lovely position this, because black can hardly move any of his pieces. Really the only piece he can move in this position is the rook on c6, but moving that doesn't help. Okay, well I hope you enjoyed that game. When I get this internet sorted out, I'll be able to come back with you for some more games, and hopefully also I'll be able to get this French DVD up and selling. Okay, catch you soon then. Bye.